Welcome to the Holy Spirit's Curriculum of Joy podcast. My name is Wanaka Oberhuber, and my guest today is Aida Sorenson. Hello.
Hello. This is
So
Aida.
wonderful to have you here. Yeah.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So let's start out with a question that I like to ask. How was your life before you got to know A Course in Miracles, and what changed in your perception or your ideas about the world after you got to know it, and how did that come about?
Wow. Okay. How was my life before I found A Course in Miracles? Well, before I found A Course in Miracles, I was into metaphysics. Even at the age of 9, I was reading my parents' books, like by Norman Vincent Peale, also the book Psycho-Cybernetics, and a channeled book, The Channeling of Seth. Seth was being channeled by a woman. And because I was precocious and I wanted to know more of the truth about life when I was hearing in school or on TV or in church, you know. So I was searching. At the age of 11, I found Leah Russell through her book that they had called God Will Work With You But Not For You. And I became a student of Leah Russell. She had worked with her late husband, Walter Russell, to produce many things, including books, but he had died years before that. He was a lot older than her. So for years, I was a student of theirs until, pretty active until about 1990. And I took their home study course in science and philosophy in the year after I graduated from high school in 75, and I took a year off before I decided to go to college. So I got a lot of metaphysical science, philosophy, that she said only the power of love can save this world. They said that all things come in pairs of divine opposites, like even labor and capital are pairs of opposites that must be balanced so we can have balanced workplaces and companies in our world and things like that, as well as, of course, marriages and families and groups and societies. So it was good for me. After Leo passed in 1988, I hung on a couple of more years, but I think I was already beginning to get itchy for something else, even though I didn't consciously know it. But kind of, it was emotional for me. She was very romantic. She missed her husband so much after he died, even though she was very close to him spiritually. And then about around 1990 or so, and also along with Leo's teachings, in the 80s, I started studying holistic health, like homeopathy, flower essences, using supplements to help people's health instead of vaccines and patent medicines and prescribed medicines, things like that. Chiropractic. and emotional healing, like John Bradshaw, Melody Beatty, Healing the Inner Child, things like that, and looked into shamanism and a few other things around those areas. Um, it was around 1990 when I found A Course in Miracles, um, originally through a book, Love is Letting Go of Fear by Gerald Jampolsky. I really liked his book. I liked him and his friendly, familial style of being like a father or a friend to the people who were reading his books. I read a couple more of his books and eventually got the set of 3 blue books of A Course in Miracles. One for, you're probably all familiar with that, or some of you are. One for each of the text, the workbook, and that other part, the manual for teachers. Yeah. So anyway, I was studying it on my own, and I found a group there in Virginia where I lived. I went to the group once a week. I had a hard time with some of the people in the group, so immediately had a good place to apply the principles of the course. But it was hard. Before, um, in spite of all that metaphysics and healing, I felt like my life was hard. Um, about from the age of 7 onwards, um, I felt like I couldn't just tell people about all these metaphysical things, or I felt like the kids in school would tease me, and the Lutheran church that my parents took me to would ostracize me. So I didn't. So I felt pretty alone, even though I did things like, yeah, for a while as a kid, I was in the kids' version of the Rosicrucians, so I got their little pamphlet every month and all. It was hard for me to connect with other people and other children studying the same thing. The only thing where I connected with other children was in the Girl Scouts and in something like Sunday school type of stuff, and that wasn't exactly the same thing. And I got very lonely. Went to um, a Christian singles group and met the man I married and was married to, and did the housewife and was a housewife and mother full time in the 80s. Um, I came out here to Arizona in 93, kept studying um, the course. I just read it all the way through on my own in my little room, and eventually found um, 1 or 2 places where they did groups here, and Charles was teaching it. Charles was uh, he was a janitor at the large Unity Church here in Tucson, and he was a wonderful man. I mean, I knew he was married and had children, but I had a crush on him, not because he was handsome. He wasn't typically handsome, not that you think of in the movies and stuff, but he was so kind and loving. I was attracted to that, and he knew the course so well. But I had little instances of things that happened before the course and during my time with the course. Once in those years and in the 90s, um, when I was alone in my room reading the course and I was about to turn the page, and I swear to God that it was like the page I was about to turn was blank, completely blank, and the words did not appear on the page until I turned the page. I had that experience. And now I think of it as an experience of greater reality because there really is no time. And of course, the Course says that. time is an illusion too, as well as other places who say that. But that was my experience of no time, like that it wasn't written 30 years ago and bought it in the bookstore and all that kind of stuff. It was being written even as we speak, type of thing. So that was an interesting experience. It didn't, that particular experience did not recur, but I've had a few instances of the holy instant, just a couple of miracles that I can remember, and a few instances of revelation, like the Course talks about. Um, but I've deepened my understanding and my ability to apply the Course in my life over time. And um, if I may fast forward to this very year, um, when I found um, Sheena Louise Spalding and her group online, well, she channels Jesus and Ananda, teaches A Course in Miracles. And though I'd heard of her several years before, this time I needed something, and she was what I needed. So I joined her group, and I pay $33 a month. But she channels twice a month, does some retreats, um, and different things. I can connect with other people on the group and their wisdom and the channelings that they bring to the group, and different stuff like that. And I really like that. And it's helped me to really connect and deepen my practice of the Course every day when I get online and do the lesson for the day. And then hear her channeling Jesus, talking for a little while about that lesson and things like that. So that's been a great experience I've had for about 4 months. And I thank God that always, even when I was homeless in the past, whatever I needed always came to me in my life on the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels. I never really, I may not have said that or felt that at the time, but looking back, I always know that that's true. So I guess that's basically is my answer to your questions. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you for answering the question. Would you like to expand on your revelatory experiences, for instance?
Well, as the Course says they're impossible to describe in words. And to tell you the truth, they went inside of me and became part of me, so that I can no longer even describe them or remember them to myself outside of something outside of myself that quote unquote happened to me. They went inside of me and became a part of me. So I'm sorry. No, I can't.
Okay, well, you can, I suppose, describe how your view of the world changed because of them then.
That's a good point. Yes, it did. Because at some point, I realized that, as my friend and uh, teacher, Lee Flynn, next door in New Mexico, has said, the world is in me as much as I'm in the world. And at some point, I realized that. And I've had some mystical experiences around feeling that presence that you may call revelations, about feeling that the whole world, the whole universe actually was in me and a part of me. Once a long time ago, maybe around 89 or something. I was lighting an incense that came in the form of a little pyramid. So I was lighting one corner of the pyramid, and right after I lit it, while the flame was still there, I saw in the flame what seemed to be the whole universe, a whole lot of balls like planets and things like that that seemed like it was the whole universe in the flame for a split second before the flame went out. It only happened once. It never happened again, but that was a mystical experience. Yeah, that was fun. How has my concept of the world changed? Has a lot to do with that oneness. Like, I see other people in me. What they say remind me of what I say. How they act remind me of how I act or how I acted in the past. Or I see how they act or what they think or say. And then in the future, I may act the same way. And I notice that. So um, it has a lot to do with the concept of oneness. Not only my oneness with other human beings, but my oneness with all life, um, even with the stones. And I don't really have a story about that that I can remember. With animals, I've had experiences with animals once when I was at the zoo a while back here in Tucson, and I was standing there far away from the enclosure where a giraffe, a big tall giraffe was, and I was looking in its eyes. And we had a moment. I saw so much in this giraffe's eyes, and I think it saw something in my eyes that maybe it was just love, just plain old love. I don't know, but it was momentous. And in the backyard of a place I was living for a while, I saw, came up a couple of feet from, suddenly I realized there was an owl perching on some kind of a cylinder, wooden cylinder that was planted into the ground. And I looked into its eyes and I felt so much what an owl was. This, not fear, not that I should fear it, but definitely that I should respect it. It had a lot of power. And with my very own kitty, Vega, that I've had for the past few years, one time I had an experience. Um, I was lying on my bed and he was lying near me. And I don't know what I was doing, but I was awake. But then suddenly I was drawn to look in his eyes, and his eye was flashing out of his eyes this blue kind of this energy that zapped into my eyes. I felt all the energy in the blue light, and then it stopped. It was only for a second. And I thought, what is this? Is he really a cat? Or who's coming through my cat sending me this? I didn't know the answer to those questions. But I think it could have been my cat who was sending me healing energy because I can't assume that I know what a cat is. As the Course says, quote, I do not know what anything is for, unquote, right? So those are a few of the experiences I've had, around that type of thing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And you said you also had
hmm
a whole lot of miracle experiences. Would you like to describe some of those?
Well, not a lot of miracle experiences that I can remember, but I remember one. I used to go to a mental health day program for about 27 years or so, starting in the late 90s. I just stopped going there a few years ago. But anyway, so the people there all had mental health issues. So sometimes they were grouchy and stuff like that, like quote unquote normal people are and stuff, but it was more on the surface. And this one girl was always like that. And I was sitting at the table to have lunch with that girl and with two other women. And it seemed like she was going to get grouchy again. And I prayed about it. I didn't specifically ask for a miracle, but suddenly it was like something happened to her and her whole demeanor changed and she was happy. And, without my doing anything to physically, consciously try to manipulate her into being happy or acting happy with my words or anything. So that experience felt like a miracle to me. And I was happier too,
That's
because I
great.
wasn't anticipating her being, being mad and grouchy again,
Yeah.
you know.
Let's go back
Yeah.
to some of the things you shared before about your metaphysical studies. How did
hmm
how did your metaphysical studies, like the Seth material or the other ones, how did that inform you when you got to know A Course in Miracles? Or did A
Well,
Course in Miracles um, say something totally different in your experience?
well, it didn't say something totally different, but its emphasis, um, I would say that A Course in Miracles was most like Leo Russell's material from the University of Science and Philosophy. Like she wrote a book called Love, and they, she and Walter emphasized love in all human relations, and even said that the actual physical elements of which everything is constructed, like sodium and magnesium and calcium and all that stuff, each are created in pairs of opposites, like balanced mates, and that sodium and chloride were completely balanced mates. When you put them together, they make table salt, and there is no sodium or chloride in table salt. It's a new creation. And that made me think of, so you said when people are balanced mates, it's like that too. But when you put sodium with something that's way, way off balance for it, that's when you make an explosion in those physical elements. And that's when people have explosions in them too, when they try to mate with someone who's really, really not suited for them at all, because they're too far apart in their basic thinking and their basic, basically who they are. So, A Course in Miracles doesn't really talk about um, that subject of mating very much at all, but it sure talks a lot about love, you know, that we are to love each other by forgiving each other, and we ultimately we have to get to the point where we, like God, see that there is nothing to forgive in the first place. But until then, until we're at that point, when we have a grievance, we have to forgive. The quote unquote other person, we have to see them as, you know, quote, give me your blessing, Holy Son of God, unquote. One of the titles of a workbook lesson, you know, and completely turn it around and see the Christ in that. And Leo talked about Christ. Leo and Walter talked about Christ consciousness as a step in our evolution of mankind, which we would all get to one day or at some point. So there were, some things that they had in common. So I found the Course in Miracles when I was ready because I was studying about love and balanced mates and balanced everything else. And and it was easy for me to love mankind as a whole. It was very, very difficult for me to love individual people. I know I'm not the only one who's had that experience. I had a real hard time in my family and I wanted to run away at 14, but at 14 I didn't feel capable of taking care of myself out there, so I waited until I was 18 and I did run away, but only for one night because I was afraid. And I called my family phone number before there were cell phones, and um, my mother and my grandmother, Grandma Ida, was sobbing and crying over the phone and begging me to come back and they'd make everything better. So I came back the next day. But, and even now, I do feel like I have a balanced mate, but we're so opposites in the outer personality type of ways that, um, and I know that now that happiness is an inside job. It can't be dependent on even your husband or wife, your pet, or anybody else to give it to you. They can help you find the way or point the way or your guru or whatever, but it's an inside job. So I'm trying to become a happier person. Um, and while I study these teachings of the Course, um, that's my goal in life, and to help take care of myself, and in so doing, also help the world in which I live as much as I can. Because now I'm 63 and I feel like I'm in that stage of life of women's stages of maiden, mother, and crone. And now I'm a crone, and I'm supposed to give out to help my community with my wisdom. So I want to do that as much as I can, give and with really give and not, not sacrifice. Because of course the Course always says, there is no sacrifice required. And if you're sacrificing, you're in a special relationship. And that's not good. So, you know what I mean? So, I'm complete.
That, that's powerful. The, the recognition that sacrifice shows you that you're in a special relationship. And at that moment, right? That you're seeing your relationships as special. Yeah.
Hmm.
Very, very well put.
Thank you. Sip
And
of my.
you mentioned shamanism. I know that was an important part of my journey to an opening up a book about shamanism. How did it affect your journey?
Well, I've always had this mystical side. Even when I was 9 years old, I found my way to get a pack of little cards. They weren't tarot cards. I remember they had little geometrical designs in different colors, and I don't remember any more about them. But they were some kind of oracle cards that I played with, that I did something with, or tried to use them as an oracle or something. Like I said, I don't remember much more about that. But I read uh, a few of the books of Carlos Castaneda and really took in his stories about, um, I forgot the name of the guy he worked with, the
Don Juan
shaman.
or something like that?
Yes, Don Juan Mateus, I think.
Yeah, I don't remember
But
either. I'm not sure.
yeah, but yeah. Anyway, and then thought, and it expanded my view at that time of what was possible. The same thing happened when I heard about Rumi in the 90s. Um, Rumi was, I guess, gaining a lot of popularity in the United States, at least in the 90s. And I heard about him. I took this class about healing, and This lady who called herself Gabriella Mistral, beautiful woman, had us dancing to different kinds of sort of mystical music and reading Rumi to us and practicing healing on each other, hands on or hands near the body healing. And uh, we went together to go see some Sufi dancing, and it was all really great, you know. And um, I regretted that I had a hard time. I was never a good housekeeper, so I had a hard time with that. I'm still not that good of a housekeeper. Mostly my partner does that part. I have to be honest here. But anyway, at one time, Gabriella had some problem and she asked me if she could spend a night at my house. And I said no. And now I'm really sorry I did that. But I told somebody the other day who was really regretting something from her past that don't worry because the opportunity will come up with that person, place, or thing or situation again. You will always have another chance to get it right. And so that heartens me too. You know what I mean? But yeah, Rumi's guy that he followed around, uh, Shams of Tabriz, that when Shams left, like uh, Don Juan Mateus, he whirled around and disappeared. And I think Don Juan did something like that too. He didn't like die, you know. And I've heard of different gurus and looked into Aida for a while and am happy that I'm kind of familiar with Ram Dass. And every other Thursday or so, I listen to um, Krishna Das, who was a friend of his. You know, he just died 1 or 2 years ago. Ram Dass did, and he's singing these Hindu Buddhist chants, playing on his harmonium. We can all sing along from our houses online because after COVID started, he stopped doing public gatherings in different cities like he was doing earlier. And he started doing this online thing once a week. So, anyway, it made it easier for me to connect with him. So, I love, you know, quite a bit. I love hearing that music and singing along. I try to embrace the best of most religions, you know.
Yeah, sounds good. To open your mind, right? Because one of the qualities of a teacher of God is open mindedness. And so, yeah. And the Course in Miracles obviously states that it's not the only way.
Right. And an interesting thing about me, you may find it interesting, is that I'm a first generation American. I may have told you this. I'm not sure, but so my parents are and were from Palestine. So as I mentioned, they took me to a Lutheran church. That's not how they were raised, but that's how I was raised after they came to this country, got married and had me, and then had my two siblings. Um, so uh, and you know, so I was hearing a lot of conflict about that place that my parents grew up in on the news, and a lot of and sometimes epithets about Arabs. And my parents told me, "Don't tell the kids in school where your parents are from because they'll tease you or something, or they'll." And actually, my younger brother created the situation where I guess he did tell the kids in high school, and they did bully him with that excuse. And I think I still have to forgive those kids for that. But anyway, um, but the thing about that is I had to work through that anger and saying, "Oh, okay, I'm not going to blame the Jews, and I'm not going to blame So I asked my mother at some point, "Are you mad at the Jews?" And she said, "No." And she explained what she thought about all that to me and all these, even though, when my family would get together, different, cousins and uncles and aunts and everything, they'd always say, Israel is the 51st state and, all that kind of stuff. They're all from Palestine. They're all in the same situation. And I think they felt sort of pushed out, sort of like they had to leave because once Israel happened, they felt like they were being treated like second-class citizens. But like many, many people, most people all over the globe have felt that way at some point or another, have been repressed or oppressed or had fights with neighboring countries or other religions or all that stuff. But so since I was the first generation that was born here, it was in my face a lot growing up, and I had to find a way to work that out. And that helped drive me to metaphysics too, because I said, can't we all, when I was a kid, I said that to myself, like, can't we all just love each other and get along? Well, how can we? But it was a long time, when I wanted to save the world when I was a kid, and and I was told I had to grow up and before I could do anything like that. But that was true because it took my growing up before I realized that before I could be saving any kind of world, I had to sort of save myself and become a forgiving person and stop, you know, having so much conflict with the people right there in my family and my neighborhood, which had nothing to do with any conflicts between the Palestinians and the Israelis and any of those type of things. You know what I mean? Just little local things. So it was very, I needed the course, and I still need it now, and that keeps me humble.
Well put. There's so much to gain by accepting the atonement for oneself. Yeah.
Hmm.
At this point,
Yeah.
if anyone wants to ask a question, I'll open the floor for that. No? Okay, then I'll continue. You mentioned that the book that made you aware of A Course in Miracles was Love is Letting Go of Fear by Jerry Jampolsky. And it's the same book that I heard about A Course in Miracles from first.
Oh, cool.
So that's really cool. Yeah. Yeah. And the message, he gives the message in very easy to understand examples and words. So I'm sure that helped you when you started actually reading A Course in Miracles itself.
Yes, it did. And I bought a little pack of blue cards from them, from Jerry, and each card had some principle of the course on it or something like that. And it was a pack of 48 cards or something. There I go with the cards again. And but that was helpful too, because it was very succinct. That I could take it with me in my purse instead of carrying a book around or whatever, and read it over and over.
Yeah.
And other
So,
people have made cards since then, and I just recently connected with Dave Fair online, Phare. I think he's in Australia. I'm getting feedback on myself. I was hearing myself talk, but now that's stopped. Um, my friends on the other course call that I've been doing told me about the 20-minute book. And it's really just a little pamphlet that has the course reviews of the first 50 lessons. And you could read it in about 20 minutes. So I asked Dave if online on Facebook, I found him, and Asked him if I could buy a copy or something, and he said, "I'm on vacation, but I'll send you some." And he didn't ask for payment, and he sent me about 20 or 30 copies of this little pamphlet, so that was really great of him. And I have something now that I can just give out. That's something uh, important from the course, and yet it didn't cost anything, and it gives somebody a lot to read that. Even start with that and carry it around. I'm glad.
Yeah, that's marvelous. I actually had an author on the podcast who wrote a book with, I think he also took the 50 first lessons of A Course in Miracles and condensed them into a book.
Hmm,
Yeah.
cool. What's their name?
Um, I think it's,
Do you remember?
yes, I know, but one moment. I think, yeah, I'll give it to you. Richard Lodi. You can listen to the episode at your ease.
Cool. And there's
Can I?
someone I know. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask a question. Um, you described having like an awareness of sensitivities as a very young child, and I'm wondering how long it took you to understand that those were special, intuitive, communications you were having versus feeling like people were thinking you were odd or something was wrong with you. Like, how long did it
Um,
take for you to really understand those messages? Or did you understand them right away?
well, I understood them on some level right away, but I still had that fear also at the same time. Now, to get rid of the fear took me another 30 or 40 years. You know, After 50, I was like, I'm going to let people into my house. I'm not ashamed of being messy anymore. I'm going to let people into my mind and my heart. I was opening up, losing the shame and the fear. Course in Miracles helped. Jesus helped through the Course. Thank you, Jesus.
Okay, so you came to be settled in your own true truth.
Yes, I was.
Yeah, you have a very sweet little giggle when you come to some personal understanding when you talk. Like your voice gets very light and
Hmm.
and and joyful. And it's a little connection with yourself that I noticed.
Well, that's great. Thanks for helping me notice that too. Hmm. I had to unlearn a lot. And I think everything. At some point, I read that, and maybe in connection with the Course, that we have to take everything we've learned, which is from the ego, right? And unlearn it. Let it go so that we could learn the lessons of the Course of the Holy Spirit in us, through us, with us, around us, and all that stuff. What's real, what's true, and get that, do that, be that.
Yeah, that's a very important point. This forgetting to remember in A Course in Miracles. You need to forget in order to remember the truth.
Hmm. Oh,
Yeah,
I like
or,
the way you put that.
yeah. So the illusions drop away and the truth becomes obvious to you, right?
Well, it does. I mean, it takes time, but that's what time is for. It's a process. And of course, I'm still in that process. You know, I was once in a group several years ago that said that stars are beings just like we are. Now, maybe that's obvious to all of you, but I never really thought of it that way. They said that they are very, very enlightened beings when they get to that point. When you get to a point of becoming a star, of course, not the Hollywood kind, the kind up in the sky, um, that you do your whole life by shining your light, which is really like your love, right, on everybody 24/7. That's what you do all the time, and you're fulfilled in that. Um, and so it seemed like, the process of us as eternal beings never really ends. And that's not something to despair about. I have despaired about that once in a while, but it's something to be hopeful for and grateful for, that we keep on enlarging our sense of love, our sense of oneness, our power to do good in the world, and then later in the galaxy, later in the whole universe, later in the whole whatever, whatever is out there. But I said the other day, and Lee said, "You should write that down," but I didn't. But I said something like, space, we only have space uh, uh, to give us space to realize, until we realize that we're all together in the same space, that we're all one. And we only have time to give us a chance to realize basically the same thing, that we love everybody and we're all one. That's all time and space are for. That's why they're an illusion. That's why they're a construct, but they're not eternal, and they're malleable. And Jesus said he's in charge of time, and all that. And he can collapse it, and there's the celestial speed up that's talked about in the Course. And I think it's happening now. And Jesus has talked about ascension and the event, and so has Ananda, and so has a lot of other people and beings recently in this past couple of years, and maybe even before that. And I don't think that conflicts with the Course one little bit, because the Course is truth. So, how can anything that's also truth conflict with this truth? How can this truth conflict with some other truth? There is no other truth. There's just truth with a capital T. That's how I came to understand it. So, anyway.
Yeah, you were speaking a lot about channels, including Jane Roberts and Gina Spalding and a few others, I believe. How is it for you? Do you have a feeling that you're channeling Yeshua?
Um, yes, but for now, it's only for me. It's just inside of me. I don't receive any word for word messages to give to others, to speak out loud. You know, I've had experiences with my mental health, as I alluded to. I've had experiences taking the drugs they prescribed to me with my mental health, an experience of being um, kind of haunted a little bit, for real, in the illusion. Those things really did happen to me. And for 10 years, basically ending in 2020, um, things were disappearing from me and from my house. And when I lived in two different houses over that span of time, so it wasn't something attached to the house, it was something attached to me. But I feel like I've finally gotten rid of that now, because I've raised my vibration thanks to my studying the Course, thanks to my getting together with my soulmate, thanks to my basically healing a lot more stuff inside myself. Um, Scary things are not happening anymore in my life, that are personally scary like that. Thank God. What was your question again? Oh, channeling.
Yes, I was
Well,
asking
when
about whether you felt like you were channeling Yeshua.
Oh, right, right. Yeah, so no, not in the sense that I would invite people over or I would get online and say, listen to me and do a channeling. No, it's just that I believe that Jesus' voice is in me and he talks to me. I believe that Leah Russell, although she passed on in 88, she still is with me too. I loved her a lot. You know, she was a lot older, right? She was in 88. I was what? I turned 30 the year before, and she was in her late 80s. So she was like 50 years older than me or 60 years older than me when she passed in 88. But that doesn't matter. That's about time. But she's still with me, and she still talks to me. So she's one of my guides. Jesus is definitely a spiritual master that's with me and talks to me as much as I can. I'm ready to hear him, but I have gotten confused in the past sometimes when somebody was talking to me 1 or 2 years ago and telling me different stuff, and I got mixed up, and I was living alone. I got all bothered and upset, and finally I said, "Just go away," and then pow, that being or beings who said they were from another universe, and I believe such a thing exists, but were gone. They didn't even, they didn't even like say, "Okay, we're going now, goodbye." They just, they were gone immediately. As soon as I said, "Just go away," they were gone. So, I mean, I believe they were very kind beings, but I was taking it the wrong way. I was mixing up some things they were saying with something that could be harmful, or it felt too much like it was about me and like I was getting too much on my high horse or something. I was confused. So I didn't, it was too upsetting to me. So I ended it like that. Whereas somebody that was having that same experience that didn't have any mental health issues, that hadn't, been through stuff I'd been through and could have taken it very clearly and started channeling that being a group of beings. But I wasn't able to do that at the time. You see what I mean?
Are you saying that you have the feeling you would be able to do that now?
Um, I'm not sure. I know if I would be able to do that if when it happens. That's for sure. If you see me on YouTube channeling, then you'll know that I was able to do it.
Yeah,
That's what
good
I know.
point. Yeah. Do you write down the things that you receive, or how do you keep
Um,
track?
Sometimes a little bit, not that much. I've written things over the years, but the most important things I still remember. Some things, like I said, were so important that I wasn't trusted or didn't trust myself or whatever. The universe didn't trust me to remember them in my mind. So the experience, instead of going into my mind, simply went into me and became part of me. So there was nothing, no more to remember. Because think about the word remember. Re means again. Member means a part of your body, like your member is like your hand or your foot or whatever. To remember means to have it in your body again. So I think the deepest way to remember is if it becomes part of your very cells almost, like your DNA even.
What else? Yeah, so you have these circles in which you are listening to channelings with that are coming from a source that you all feel is Yeshua. Um, oh, how does this affect your experience in everyday life that you have this deep connecting with people who are all feeling that they are hearing or in some way receiving messages from such a wonderful source?
Well, it helps me feel more guided. It helps me feel like I'm not just making decisions for the sake of myself, my family, uh, on my own. I know, and I've known for a while, the principle that God is always with me. But to have a higher representative of God, higher than me in that sense, be saying to a group of people, including me, well, I really think you should start gardening because I've heard what they're planning, and they're planning to uh, use a control mechanism on you guys of limiting your access to food. So it'd be really good if you have your own food supply, for instance. And so now I'm trying to see how I can arrange that. We just live in an apartment with no place to plant outside right here. I'm trying to see about us moving, and I've tried different other ideas too, community gardens and stuff like that. To do practical things, help ourselves during this momentous time in which, in a sense, the old earth world is dying and the new earth world is being born. Because I believe that Gaia, the earth herself, is ascending or has ascended too, from the third to the fifth dimension. And that, as Jesus said, um, the moving from the third to the fifth dimension is basically just moving from fear to love, which is exactly the same thing as the Course, you know, wants us to do. So, which, by the way, about the Course, I came to a realization last year that the Course is not just a book, it's a being. And it's a being whose father, of course, is Jesus, and whose mother was Helen Schuckman. And that explains a lot about different people's, including my experiences with it. It's a being. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, a being. I think that
Mm-hmm.
it's alive in you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you can actually interact with that aliveness, right?
And I have. And I think that, things that people have mentioned, like they're in a bookstore and A Course in Miracles falls off the bookshelf when they walk by, and things like that is part of the interaction between that being, that soul, and their soul, their being. It's calling to them as they're calling to it. They don't know it yet until something like that happens, or something like my reading Jerry's book happens, or, you know, whatever. Different people have had different experiences of how they hear about it, you know.
Yeah, it is amazing how people get to know it.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I'm getting tired, so I'm going to call an end, if you all don't mind, to this part of the time. You said we had an hour and a half and that other things could happen during the rest of the time. You know what I mean? That's right, right?
Yes, let's do this. Well, so thank you for everyone listening. Thank you, Ida, for being here.
You're welcome.
And please spread the word about the podcast. Review it on your favorite podcast platforms. And yeah, enjoy.
I sure will. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.